Today's guest is Judith Hoover, and she's going to talk about Irvin S. Cobb. Has anybody ever heard of Irvin S. Cobb? And a very popular writer during his lifetime. Think of like James Patterson popular. It's like he was very popular during his lifetime and not well remembered today. Anyway, she's going to explain about him and give her a big hand.
All right, as you can see, this was actually written in 1983, a long time ago, when I was a student. And it was part of my doctoral dissertation at IU. So, as I said to Mark earlier, when I say Irvin Cobb, people just give me a blank look, like, what? So hopefully tonight you'll go away from here knowing who he was and what he did. And it was quite spectacular, actually, what he did. Let's look at who he was. So give us the first one. There he is in all his glory. Now, he always had a cigar in his mouth. And this is ancient and fragile, so I'll just hold it up to show you. There he is. Looks a little better in this picture, I think. But this was from the Irvin Cobb Cigar Company. And on the back, it says, the ordinary retail price of the cigars herein contained is intended by the manufacturer to be more than 4 cents each and not more than 6 cents each. So getting a cigar for 6 cents is quite a long time ago. Okay, let's see our next one. He was a great lover of fishing and hunting. And I'll talk more about that as we go along. But you can see the look on his face. He always was very odd looking as a character, but it didn't hurt his sales of books and movies and so on. Okay? Now, as Mark and I have both noted, he was highly successful as a writer. He actually wrote 70 books, published 70 books. He wrote 300 short stories for which he was paid $500. He wrote speeches. He gave speeches everywhere. He wrote jokes and quips and essays and opinion pieces for magazines. For 10 years, he wrote daily human interest columns for New York newspapers. He started out as a cub reporter in 1892 at the age of 16 for the Paducah Evening Post. He was known as the Duke of Paducah. And even though he never came back after he left for New York and for California, he always said that his home was Paducah, and the people of Paducah always thought of him as their own. But in 1904, when he was 28, he moved to New York, and when he couldn't find a job, he sent letters to every newspaper, and amazingly enough, he suggested that they would get the best writer and the best editor who had ever come to New York to uplift journalism. A little proud of himself, wouldn't you say? But he got 4 job offers, and he took one with the New York Evening Sun, and he was assigned to cover the peace treaty that settled the Russo-Japanese War. And because of his work on that, his columns, he got an offer from Joseph Pulitzer's newspaper, which was the Evening World. And pretty soon he was writing for the Saturday Evening Post. Do we remember the Saturday Evening Post? Yes? Okay. And Cosmopolitan and other magazines. In 1915, he made his movie debut in a film called The Arab. I don't know if he was the Arab, but he was in that movie. And later he appeared in 6 more films, including one called The Great White Way, Everybody's Old Man, Steamboat Round the Bend. He saw 3 of his plays produced on Broadway, and in one, he had 2 unknown actors at the time. One of them was Thomas Mitchell, we may remember him, and Edward G. Robinson, before he became a gangster. Cobb made after-dinner speeches for all kinds of groups. I don't know if we still have after-dinner speeches as common as they were in this time period, but he gave them to everybody from elite groups in Hollywood to local Kentucky groups, and he helped with fundraising, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. He was judged first in contemporary letters, meaning writing, by a group of his peers in 1923. By the 1930s, he spoke to a national audience in his own radio program. We have the next slide, please. Sorry. That was it.
Let me go here.
That, yeah. Right. You can see as an NBC microphone there. And that lasted for a number of years. In his novels, his main character was Judge Priest. And we can go ahead and show that one.
Here. Court's gone to order.
Will Rogers.
Is a confirmed chicken thief. He has no place in this God-fearing community. He is a vagrant. He cometh from no man knows whence. Since arriving in our midst, he has been known to do no honest work. The Commonwealth of Kentucky asks, yea, demand, that he be adjudged guilty and sentenced to 6 months on the chain gang. Hey, boy, wake up there. Sheriff, wake him up there. If anybody's going to sleep in this court, it'll be me. Hey, wake up. Come here, boy. Yeah. Come on over here, right there. What's your name?
Duke Poindexter.
Poindexter?
Yeah.
Who gave you that?
Mr. Riley.
Randy? You mean Major Randolph Poindexter from down at Pine Bluff?
Yeah, Pine Bluff.
Well, looks like you Poindexters is always getting mixed up with some chicken somehow. Hey, Sergeant, seems like I recollect you and Major Randy having some connection with the flesh of the fowl at one time. You're good if we didn't. You know, Major Randy was the fightingest soldier that ever chased a yak up a tree. You know, Billy, you and me put near starved that day when we were foraging for a snack after the Battle of Chickamauga. Chickamauga? No, it was the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. There's no such a thing as a Chickamauga. Oh, you're both wrong. I'm not wrong. It was the summer of '63, and we were just outside of Nashville. No, Billy's right. I remember. Or wasn't I there, Mitchell? Your Honor, the Commonwealth objects to this digression. Now, Senator, you know, now the point is that the Major, he acted the part of a gentleman and a soldier, and he removed the temptation from out of our path by eating up all the fat hens in the whole bunch and leaving us nothing but a lot of old skinny Dominic roosters. You remember, boy? Come to think of it, Billy, they were Plymouth Rocks. There was no such a thing that was Yankee chicken. There was Rhode Island Red. But I know what I could trust it. No Plymouth Rocks. Yankee was Rhode Island Red. Dominic. It was Dominic. Is this a court of law? I know that. I ask you, is this a court of law? Now, Senator, don't get on your high horse that way. You know, we ain't in a great big hurry, but incidentally, what are you charged with there, boy?
Nothing, Judge, but I wasn't there them chickens showing up. I just fishing.
Fishing? Where was you fishing?
Down Sleepy River.
Ain't no fishing Sleepy River. Oh, sir. Ain't either. 4 catfish. Box of that, Jimmy. Yeah?
So it's like, folks, I catch good-ass catfish in there how long?
There's your proof he's lying. Here, come here. What do you use for bait?
Oh, I got a hunk of beef liver.
Beef liver?
Yeah, I take the
That's
beef
good.
liver, put it on the hook and chunk it out there, let them have the first piece for nothing, see 'em. Then you put some more on that and chunk it out there, and then they think they're going to get that for nothing, and you catch them long as you got the liver. And I go down there all the time, and I don't care nothing but that liver.
Yeah, I remember. Oh, down there. How about my Bill Avon?
Okay, we're done with that one. All right. In his novels, Judge Priest was always the hero, and Jeff Poindexter was the person who was accused of something. You may have noticed in the credits, his name as an actor is Stephen Fedget, and that refers to being a person who was being told what to do by a boss, step and fetch it. But here's the interesting part. We have a stereotype of the black person there represented, and we have all of the stereotypical Southern politicians yelling at each other and cursing and so on. But in the end of the clip, that I wanted to take it that far because Judge Priest is walking down the path with Jeff, and Jeff is a major character in all of Judge Priest's books. And he himself was the first black actor to have his name listed in the credits. And you may have noticed his name was bigger than the other people that he was associated with. And he was the first black actor to earn $1 million. Now, Cobb's writing and Stephen Fetchett's acting both became a laughing stock rather than something humorous as time went on. And when the civil rights movement began, they both faded from view because of the use of so many stereotypes. The two issues that I wanted to talk about in regard to this film clip. First one is the stereotypes. The second one is that the judge himself seems to see Jeff as a fellow human being. They're walking down the path, going to go fishing. And Jeff seems to respond to that. And in later stories and films and books, Jeff became a much more sympathetic character than he is here. But you may have noticed that the judge referred to him as boy throughout. So what we have is the time period that stereotypes became so common. You can imagine that all American film goers saw this as normal. And it's a wonder to me that we ever overcame that, because it was so ingrained in the culture. Okay, in 1934, Cobb and his family moved to Santa Monica, California, so he could both write screenplays and act in films. And he starred with Will Rogers in Steamboat Round the Bend. In the film, he and Rogers were competitors in a steamboat race, so we can look at that one. And we'll only go as far with this one as the preacher.
Okay.
Okay. Now, in one way, we might think of Irvin Cobb as the Johnny Carson of his era, and that's because in 1934, as Master of Ceremonies for the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, he gave Claudette Colbert her Oscar for the film It Happened One Night, and he also gave 6-year-old Shirley Temple her miniature Oscar. She said "Thank you, Mr. Cobb," she said. "Mommy, can I go home now?" Her award was the last one given, and it was way past her bedtime by then. So let's eat early.
Where'd the mouse go?
The lovely little star gets the prize for 1934.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cobb. Mommy, can I go now?
The lovely little star gets the prize for 1984.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cobb. Mommy, can I go home now?
Okay. Cobb and Will Rogers were the very best of friends. They appeared together in many situations and were actually friends more like brothers than friends. But shortly after both of those films were completed, Rogers was killed in a small plane crash in Alaska. The Santa Monica post office was renamed in his honor, and in the ceremony, Cobb said of his friend, "Now and then, among the children of the earth, there is one who is a brother to the stars." So, no humor there, just sincere feelings about his friend. As I said earlier, although he never returned to Paducah, he always called it his home. When anyone asked him where he was from, he'd say, "I'm from Paducah, Kentucky." And there were many things named for him. We've already noticed the cigar company. There was the Irvin Cobb Hotel in Paducah, and it had 8 floors, and it had 200 rooms. It had a roof garden, and each room had its own bathroom, which was quite unusual in those days. Other things include a bridge across the Ohio River, a Missouri corncob pipe, a racehorse, a bass bait, a hunting shirt, a canyon in Oregon, and a street in Texas, and a pointer dog. So, all kinds of honors, we might say. If you remember the first slide, you might wonder why my book is called a rhetorical biography. Rhetoric, as I have studied it, is persuasion. That's all it is. We hear people these days saying, "Oh, it's not true, it's just rhetoric." Well, rhetoric is persuasion, and whatever kind of persuasion you practice will determine how successful you are. And so as a graduate student in communication, I was interested in the ways various people attempt to persuade. Think of your own situation. Who's trying to persuade you to think this or do that? But I thought it would be more interesting to listen to political speeches, to think about humor as a way of persuading. Think of the TV shows, Archie Bunker, which are humorous, but they also have a serious message buried in there somewhere. So, since Cobb had all this access to the media, I wanted to think about how he used humor or satire in his persuasive efforts. One thing he said, I've heard this from lots of folks lately, if you want to know or understand the history of something, look to the persons who wrote the history books. what were their attitudes, what were their purposes in writing the history book. So who wrote the history book of Little Bighorn, for example? He used that as his example. He reported on World War I from France and came back in 1919 to make speeches as a way to raise money for Braille books for people who were blinded in the war. And he wrote and spoke very eloquently about the suffering of the Belgians, but then he lightened it up by talking about how he went to war in a taxi cab, which he really did. The newspaper didn't give him any money to hire a car or buy a car even. And so he really did go to war in a taxi. He spent much of his time raising money for various causes. For example, in 1921, he sold seats to a play at Macaulay's Theater in Louisville to raise money so that the state of Kentucky could buy Federal Hill in Bardstown. How many of us have been to my old Kentucky home? Okay. It was owned privately at that time, and it had fallen into ruin. And so the state of Kentucky was willing to take over the repairs, but they didn't have the money, or at least they said they didn't. So Irvin Cobb helped to raise money for that purpose. He also raised money during the Depression so that no one would go hungry. He raised money for Save the Children in 1940. I just had a thing on my computer today asking for money for Save the Children, so it's been there for all these years and still is. He also raised money for Children's Village in upstate New York, and it provided psychiatric and vocational counseling for children who were either neglected or delinquent. He was a religious crusader. Not that he wanted everybody to be what he was, but he was a religious crusader in the cause of tolerance. In 1926, in a speech to the National Democratic Club, he claimed that America's greatest calamity was that the Mayflower didn't make a round trip. Think about that. He said, ever since the Mayflower, we still suffered from the bigotry of the Puritans. He said, someone is always telling us what we should do and how we should live, and he blamed countless ministers who preached the gospel of hate. I think we can relate. It may have been a difference of opinion in his home as a child that caused him to rebel against rules. His mother was the rule maker. He was forbidden to play games or even whistle on Sunday. Sometimes his father would sneak him and his brothers and sisters through the back fence and let them wade in a stream and catch minnows on Sunday. He describes the church he attended as a child as a gaunt, hopelessly homely structure with a spire like a chiding finger and an entryway like a dark tunnel. There was, he said, the smell of sinners fried on both sides. The preacher of his church was a dear kindly, gentle old man with the face of an angel, but who liked to talk about infant damnation. From childhood, he remembered the view of the afterlife, filled with demons and tormented souls like squirming frog legs, grilled eternally on the red-hot hobs of a hell which had no fire escapes. If you've ever fried a frog leg, you know they continue to move. And he's comparing people going to that church as frog legs. He touched on hypocrisies in stories, articles, and speeches. In reference to American Indians, he said, "Now, heathen is the ugly label which we Christians plaster on those generally of darker complexions than ours, who prefer their own faith to a choice from the variegated assortment of creeds we so generously offer them." His ideal religion, we can see that one now, the dignity and beauty of Catholicism, the taste and ability of Unitarians and Episcopalians, the ethics and tolerance of Judaism, the independence and business principles of Mormons, humility and humanity of Quakers, and I especially like this one, the zeal and devotion of the Salvation Army, and the sectless preaching of Jesus Christ. In terms of the major events of his time, he campaigned endlessly against prohibition. He even moved Judge Priest from Paducah to the Bahamas, he said, so the judge wouldn't have to break the law when the supply in the dining room cupboard began running low. He was called before a New York grand jury to testify about a party he'd attended where a model bathed nude in a bathtub filled with a pink liquid. He said, "Because you can't be certain of what you're getting these days, I am not a drinking man." Therefore, he couldn't say whether the liquid contained a 0.5 or 1% alcohol to the grand jury. He wrote a novel called Red Liquor, L-I-K-K-E-R, and he spoke of the origins of the mint julep, which were wreathed in the mist of antiquity. He seemed to take great pleasure in describing the controversial process of making a julep. So great has been the argument, he says, that the controversy could only be solved by recourse to pistols at dawn. So people got into fights. One group holds that the bruised mint should be left in the potion, but my grandfather always insisted that a man who would let the crushed leaves and the mangled stems steep in the finished decoction would put scorpions in a baby's bed. Red Liquor was followed by the book Irvin Cobb's own recipe book, published by Frankfurt Distilleries. As a writer, he spent his morning writing at least 2,500 words. This to me is amazing, how anybody could put themselves through that. In the afternoon, he edited those 2,500 words and answered his correspondence, which was massive. He responded to every letter sent to him, and often he simply wrote his comments on the letter and sent it back. On the day he died, he was sitting up in bed writing. One of the things that I found real distressing when I was researching him was that in his old age, he became very, very dark in what he said. He had opinions that were quite unpredictable. He had changed so much from the humorist that he started out being. And his wife decided that she needed to destroy those works. So she burnt up everything he wrote for the last 2 years of his life. His biography says that he died of dropsy. Are we familiar with the term dropsy? Mm-hmm. What is it? Do you know? Alcohol. It's typically, today it's called edema, which means your body is retaining moisture. And it can affect the heart or the lungs or the liver. And so he died of some ailment that related to any of those things. He named his autobiography Exit Laughing, which is a bit of stage direction. In a letter to a friend, he said he wanted his epitaph to say, anyhow, he left here, because he wasn't sure which way he'd go. And he didn't necessarily believe that he would go to heaven. Okay, our next one. In researching this book way back there in 1983, you can see that there are many libraries involved, and they all required travel in 1983. Today I could do all this work from my desk at home, except for a couple of interviews. You can see interviews with his grandchildren, Buff Cobb Martin and Thomas Cobb Brody. So I made 2 trips to New York City to interview her and to read his articles in the New York newspapers. Her apartment was on 5th Avenue, overlooking Central Park. A woman dressed in a typical black and white maid's uniform opened the door and invited me into the living room, where the first thing I saw was a huge grizzly bearskin rug with plenty of teeth showing and shining eyes, a trophy from one of Cobb's hunting trips. I must have looked surprised because she said, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's been dead a long time." She was a black woman, as you can imagine. Cobb's granddaughter, a former wife of Mike Wallace, was very gracious and patiently told me stories she remembered from her childhood with her granddad. Cobb liked to have his family around, and he always had a huge house, and his daughter and her family typically lived with them. The second New York trip was memorable in a much different way. I'd been offered a co-op apartment that belonged to Patrick Tavat. You remember Patrick Tavat? He was here, what would have been the years he was here?
The 70s.
70s, yeah. And he came here to be a theater director for the community theater we used to have. But it belonged to him and 2 other friends of his, and all of them were out of town. I arrived on the hottest day of the summer and rode the subway to 92nd Street, just south of Harlem. I found the address, climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. I tried the 3 keys I'd been given, but the door would not open. After several tries, I went back outside and saw a bar around the corner. I went in and sat down, looking disgusted, I'm sure, because the woman bartender came over and asked me what was wrong. I told her my sad story, and she said she would be getting off soon, and she would help me. What to do? Do I trust this total stranger? Well, yes, I did. I had no other options. We went up to the apartment. I gave her the keys. She tried them once and twice. And on the third try, she bumped the door with her hip and it opened. She said, in New York City on a hot day, you have to resort to force because of the humidity. In the apartment, there were no windows except one on an air shaft. I finally got a light on and settled in for a difficult night, wondering if the other owners of this apartment might not know I was there and decide to come home in the middle of the night. I also worried that I wouldn't be able to open the door since I couldn't press on it from the outside. Fortunately, none of that happened. Early the next morning, I set off for the newspaper archives, which were at the public library. I took the subway to 42nd Street and thought I could walk across Manhattan to the library because it was only 12 blocks. Little did I know that these were long New York City blocks, and thus more like 24 blocks. I also didn't know what 42nd Street would be like in the early morning. Soon I discovered drunken New Yorkers were waking up in the gutter and calling out, "Hey, baby," to this little woman hurrying along with her briefcase. That was me. Instead of spending the next few days reading the articles as I had planned, I ordered copies of as many as I could afford and hoped to get back to the apartment before dark. I changed my airline ticket for the next day. You could do that in 1983. You can't do that now. And on the plane, I had a Manhattan in honor of Irvin Cobb. It seemed only right. Any questions?